Brilliant. Well, welcome once again, everyone. Great to have you here with us today on Zoom for this virtual class, logging in from the United Kingdom and Ontario, Mexico. Quite a few participants from many different places. This is fantastic technology. So I'm grateful to those at Zoom who have put this together for us. We're going to look at a presentation called How Good Is It? How Good It Is. A look at what makes a wine good, great, or perhaps fall a little bit short. And my name is Malcolm Lamont. I'm a holder of the diploma from the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. My background is in education, completing a Bachelor of Ed in 2012. And just this past February, I successfully got through, fortunately, the Certified Wine Educator qualification with the Society of Wine Educators based in Washington, D.C. So for today's class, I'll give a general overview, some things to consider about quality, and then we'll look at quality attributes that you might like to consider for the wine you have with you now, whether it's a Sauvignon Blanc or what have you. And so we'll go over 5 quality attributes, and then we'll talk about how quality is achieved in both the vineyard and in the winery. We'll shift gears and talk about the current golden age of wines that we are living today. And lastly, we'll look at price and quality. So the price of the wine and its relationship to the quality of that wine. So you may find yourself, let's say once COVID lifts and we're back to social proximity measures and you're at a winery or a wine tasting and somebody says, what do you think of this wine? You might say, it's good, or I don't know, or it's red. Which are all valid answers, unless you have a white wine, of course. But I would like to maybe suggest some things, some tools that will give you ideas that you can discuss quality attributes of a wine. So we're going to do a fairly deep dive over the next 25-30 minutes into quality attributes of all wines. So it's certainly true that tastes are subjective, but quality does exist. So it's like 9 out of 10 sommeliers would agree on the quality level of any given wine, once rated and tested by professional sommeliers. So it is possible to assess on an absolute level, even though tastes are subjective, how good a wine is.
What do the 10%?
So here's the acronym here. It's so when we're studying advanced wine courses, they teach us the acronym BLICT, and I'll repeat that. BLICT is the acronym. It stands for balance, length, intensity, complexity, and typicity. So this acronym will help us assess the quality of a wine, and we're going to go through each one of these in turn. So the first is balance, and this is perhaps the most important of all quality attributes of a wine. If your wine is out of balance, this will indicate either a poor or maybe an acceptable wine. And so the question is, what defines balance? So it's kind of like an orchestra, where if you have all the parts, the woodwind and the brass and the strings and the percussion all working in harmony together, and not one of them overpowering the other, this is the same as in wine. So if you have maybe a strong flavor, or the oak or alcohol or other structural components like sweetness or acidity are too strong, it can overpower and ruin the balance of your particular wine. And so all good and very good and outstanding wines are going to have excellent or sublime balance to them. Another important attribute is length, talking about the length of the finish. So once you've spat or swallowed your wine, then how long the pleasant flavors will linger. So a longer finish indicates a good quality wine. And if the finish is maybe 5 or 10 seconds and then it falls off, this is a short finish and it's not a good quality for a wine. But if your wine lasts for 30 seconds or a minute or more, this indicates a very good quality wine. And all good, this is a fairly direct link between the length of the finish and the quality of the wine. So for Blicht, in addition to balance and length, we also have intensity. And intensity is kind of like the strength or the concentration of flavors and textures, but it's not necessarily brute strength. So for example, a $10 or an $8 Argentina Malbec, for example, I saw somebody was drinking. it may be out of balance. So if there's just this really strong boozy or fruit-forward nature, then it may be issues with the balance of the wine. But try and think of concentration as how detectable or how noticeable the delicious flavors and textures of your wine may be. And for example, you could have a delicate wine with good concentration. I'll use an example of Chablis, which is a northern France cool climate Chardonnay from northern France, and it's unoaked and delicately flavored, almost ephemeral in nature. And it's possible with some of the better Chablis, Premier Cru, Grand Cru Chablis, to have a concentration of texture and flavor on the mid-palate and finish. That gives it that delicious concentration. Even though it's light, it can still be intense and concentrated. This can be a harder thing to assess, especially as you're just starting. But there are some students here following the WSET program in advanced courses. And I'd just like to share during my journey of the diploma, that's where I started to notice concentration of textures on the mid-palate and finish, and became a really nice thing to enjoy about wine as I learned and progressed that way. But start where you are. So essentially with intensity and concentration, just see if you can detect lovely flavors and textures. There we go. The next one in Blicht is complexity. So complexity has to do with many aromas from many different categories. So if you had a simple wine, which might be the opposite of complex, a simple wine might smell like raspberries and vanilla, or for white wine, lemons and apples, but nothing else. Whereas a complex wine might have 2 or 3 red fruit like cherry, raspberry, strawberry. There's probably some black fruit, blackberry, plum, maybe oak and spice like vanilla, clove, toast, cinnamon, and many aromas, many flavors from many different camps would define a complex wine. And this can be one of the more enjoyable things about wine. If you smell wine, unlike almost any other product, and there's a lot going on. I once heard it described as a busy wine. I thought that was an excellent description, that there was a lot going on. It was a busy wine, and this would be an indication of a complex wine.
Yeah. Well, what can you smell?
So our last characteristic in quality assessment for Blicht: balance, length, intensity, complexity, and typicity. So everybody repeat after me. Blicht.
Blicht.
And these are the quality attributes. So balance, length, intensity, complexity, and typicity. So what is typicity? This was a term I first discovered when studying wine, and it is essentially a wine term to indicate that the wine style tastes the way it should. So to go back to the Chablis example, if you ordered a Chablis, which again is a light, high acid, ephemeral, delicate wine from Chardonnay, and the server brought you a full, robust, oaky fruit bomb, and it was really out of balance, then this would not be a good example of typicity. This would be an atypical example of a Chablis. So especially with students who are studying wine, it's nice to try wines with good typicity, because then you can learn what the benchmark styles from each of the regions you're learning about should taste like. And also expressiveness is tied into the typicity, and expressiveness is kind of like the precision of the fruit. So if you smell the wine and it smells vague, it's kind of berry-like or kind of red fruit or kind of vanilla, that's not very expressive. But if you put your nose in the wine and there's really a nice red cherry, there's a nice raspberry, distinct plum, distinct spice, maybe cinnamon or clove, then this would be good expressiveness, and that's a good attribute for wines. So that is how you assess quality when you're tasting a wine. Some of you may be wondering, how do you make a high quality wine, or what differentiates a low quality wine from a high quality wine in the winemaking? So we'll talk about grape growing and in the winery. And grape growing, the Europeans, and according to this Italian proverb, typically old world countries like Italy and France and Spain and other European countries say you can't make good wine from bad grapes. And many believe this to be true. And all that means is that if you don't have good quality vineyard sites, then the grapes won't be as good and the wine can't be that good. Whereas if you have a premium site and you control things like yield, then you can produce a good wine from that good site. And the trick is just not to mess it up in the winery, and we'll talk about that. Now here's a term, yield. Is anybody familiar with this term?
Yield.
You can type into the chat box what you think yield means.
Yield?
Only in long bonds.
What do you think yield means?
The quantity of harvest.
Can
Where are you typing?
Hello and welcome to those just joining. Sorry that I'm still getting used to the technology, so sorry for delaying. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. And the question here I've just posed to everyone here is, what does yield mean? And I've got a great response from Susan Miles. She says, how much per space? I presume you're talking about how much grapes and wine is produced in an area. And so it's very similar, Diana, how much grapes are picked. That's correct. And he's got a great definition here. I can tell he's a keen diploma student. The output of the vineyard in terms of volume of grapes. And that's a good definition. And basically, yield just means the amount of grapes, whether it's volume or weight, per area of land. It's often measured in hectoliters per hectare.
Well, it should be
also measure it in tons per acre, tons per hectare. And essentially with yield, the higher the yield, the more grapes per hectare of land, the lower quality. So the same finite resources for that hectare of land are going to more clusters of grapes. So each cluster is not as flavorful or concentrated, so it won't be as intense or as long as it'll finish and maybe run into balance issues. Whereas if the yields are restricted and controlled, then you have lower yields, and the quality of each cluster of fruit from that low yielding vineyard site will be enhanced. And so as yields go down, quality generally goes up. You get longer finish, more concentrated on the palate, and perhaps more complex and balanced as well. So we'll keep going along. Sorry to those who I just let into the classroom. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. It's great to have you here with us as well. We're about halfway through. We're talking about how quality is made in the vineyard. There's Carol and John. Welcome. Nice to see you. We're talking about how quality is made in the vineyard, and now we're moving on to quality, how that's achieved in the winery. So one of the principal ideas behind quality in a winery is the selection. And so here we have a shaker table or sorting table that once the grapes are harvested, they'll be put onto the shaking table, which is vibrating as the grapes work their way down. And here we see winery workers picking out any unripe grapes, picking out any rotten grapes or moldy grapes. And so only the best quality grapes are making it past all these selection workers and into the vat and into the fermentation tank and hence into the wine. The other thing that the shaker table is great at removing is mog. Has anybody heard the term mog? Maybe some of my students out there, some keen people know what mog is, M-O-G.
Do you know what
I'll give you a clue. It's what there's taking out of the shaker table here. Let's see if anybody knows about mog. Diana says no. Dave Berdaddy's got it there. Material other than grapes. So material, matter other than grapes. Mog, M-O-G, matter other than grapes.
Oh,
and it's essentially leaves and sticks, but it also includes things like bugs and different pests that shake their way to the bottom of the table and don't go into the vat. So all the leaves are taken out by the workers, and any mog, matter other than grapes, is removed from these grapes, which make their way into the wine. So with selection, you get better quality grapes and less mog in your wine. The other key factor in a winery is perhaps you have an oak program. So with new oak barrels or any oak barrels, it will add flavors like toast, vanilla, clove, coconut, and perhaps dill, if it's American oak. And it also adds a smooth, rounded texture. As the wines age in these round oak barrels, the wine actually absorbs some oxygen from outside the barrel and creates a smoother, more robust, more age-worthy wine using oak barrels.
Now I can move this.
Another, the last attribute we'll talk about how they make quality in a winery is perhaps an aging program. Here we have a Graham's 2011 vintage port being laid down, and this is 10 years old already, just about, and it may age another 20 or 30 or 50 or more years after this. And as a wine ages, it develops these rich, complex, ethereal, aromas you've never smelt before. The molecular science of it is still being discovered, and is quite a unique thing to wines that, as you lay it down, if it's age-worthy, if it's a wine that should be aged, it can develop these rich, complex, integrated aromas like leather and mocha and olive and tobacco and cigar box, and really delicious, complex aromas with age. The drawback to aging with wine we'll talk about during the price section at the end of the webinar. So let's talk about good wine. What makes a good wine, and what makes a great wine, and what makes an acceptable wine. So here I have a, this is a Gabriel Meffre Plein de Dieu. I don't know if everybody can see that okay. So this is the wine I've selected. It's very similar to the one on your screen called Vacqueyras. The region is called Vacqueyras. And the producer there on the screen is Famille Perrin. So it comes from, if you can see on my French map here on the back wall, it comes from this region of southern France. And there's a little appellation called Vacqueyras, a little wine region called Vacqueyras in the southern Rhone. And these wines are typically good wines because they're in balance. There may be some complexity, some intensity, and some length of finish to a good wine. Not just this wine, but this is an example of a good wine. But any good wine will fit this description. It must be in balance, and there'll be some complexity, some intensity, and some concentration or finish as well, some length of finish. Great wine, this is an example of a great wine. It's a Famille Perrin from Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the south of France, so a neighboring region to the previous wine made by the same producer. And great wines across the board have sublime balance, long length of finish. They're complex with concentration and intensity. Again, that can be a delicate intensity as well. And this one happens to be a bold intensity. And quite expressive as well. So again, picking out specific, as you know, is a great wine with expressiveness. You get specific aromas like maybe blackberry or violet or graphite or different, strawberry, different complex expressive aromas. Acceptable wine. I also have an example with me here. This is the Famille Perrin Côte du Rhône Reserve. And so it's nice to be a wine educator. I do love my job. And so this is an acceptable wine. And why is it acceptable? Because it may or may not be in balance. This one happens to be in balance. And it's simple, fairly short finish, and minimally expressive. So this makes it acceptable. It's not poor because it's in balance. But there's not much complexity, fairly short finish, and not that expressive. Delicious wine, great Sunday sipper. I think this half bottle, 375 mils, was less than $10 at the LCBO. So it doesn't have to be expensive, but it delivers what you get for about $10. And Dave says, I presume that's the Graham's 2011 vintage port. Dave, that's $94 in the May vintages release. Oh, that's right. Yes, I did find out about that. The Chateau Beaucastel. So going back a minute, this one here, Dave is saying, is in the vintages release. So if you're at the LCBO in Ontario, you can access this delicious wine by Famille Perrin. And it doesn't have to be $94. This one happens to be. You can get, we're going to talk about price towards the end as well. So how good is it? Well, how good it is. Wine's origins start with the origins of human beings and cultivation of vines, but really it was advanced by the Greeks and the Romans. About 2,000 years ago, the Romans planted all sorts of wine. They plant red and white varieties, so golden wine. It was a mixture of both. And they were concerned mostly with high yields. So they wanted as much grapes as possible from the precious area of land that they're harvesting. And they used the sugar and energy and wine to give them energy and enjoy. And they made it culturally significant for their events and part of society as well. Fast forward to the Middle Ages in about 12th, 13th, 14th century CE. And during this time, the monks documented everything they were doing in the vineyard. So they wrote down what it takes to grow particular wines in different regions, particularly in Burgundy in France and Germany, and really advanced the science, you could call it, of grape growing. But there were still some issues in the winery, and perhaps the sanitation wasn't quite up to snuff, as you might imagine from the 1400s. But they were well-made, well-grown wines, and really the science advanced through those monks. Towards the late 1800s, during the Belle Époque, this might be the closest approximation to how good we have it now, although we do have it better than even then. And during this time, top chateaus, domains, top wines were being produced all over Europe, and was principally concentrated in that area, although other countries did produce wines at the time. But you get a very good or outstanding quality wine, but it was very spotty. There'd be maybe, by my estimate, 99 not well-made wines for each very well-made wine during the Belle Époque. The 20th century, early 20th century, was plagued by the two world wars, prohibition in North America, and the Great Depression. So again, quality or wine production focused on high-yielding sites so that the farmers could eke out a living rather than any quality focus with low yields or anything like that. Just allow a couple participants into the class. And welcome to those just joining. Sorry for any delay in getting in. I hope you weren't too far put off. We're just discussing, coming towards the end, a little bit more left to go in the presentation on the price of wines, and just discussing how far we've come since the Romans, Middle Ages, the Belle Époque, and the first half of the 20th century. And today, by my best estimate, we have an abundance of acceptable, well-made wines from winemakers and grape growers who are college, university trained. And you can get an acceptable wine for $10 or less in Europe, perhaps, just about in any developed country. So it really is an abundance of riches. And in addition to that, we also have access to very good or outstanding wine, especially here in Ontario and our neighbors south of the border. And many developed countries have access to some of these Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Beaucastel, and outstanding, very good quality wines. So it really is a magical time for wine, the golden age, they often describe it as currently. So finally, we'll discuss price and quality relationship. It's a complicated relationship, and it is not directly related. So for example, a $50 bottle of wine is not necessarily 5 times better than a $10 bottle of wine. And a $100 bottle of wine certainly is not necessarily twice as good as a $50 bottle of wine. But there is an indirect relationship, and that has largely to do with the cost of production. So the cost of grapes, again, a high-yielding site will produce fairly dilute wines, but at a lower cost of those grapes, whereas low yields produce more concentrated, more flavorful, longer finish, more complex and more balanced wines from low-yielding grapes, but the cost goes up because the vineyard area is producing less of those grapes. So the farmer recoups his or her costs by charging more for those high quality grapes. Oak barrels is another major cost for operating wineries. For example, one new American oak barrel costs about $1,000 Canadian. French oak barrels cost even more for one barrel. Any winery with an oak program might have to get 20 or 30 or more barrels per year, let's say. And so oak barrels are quite expensive to maintain and to purchase. Just getting a note here from Zoom. And the final thing in the winery is aging, which I touched a little bit upon with the, Dave says hand harvesting, steep sites, and machine harvest. So hand harvesting adds to the cost as well, where you'd need to hand harvest in some regions or on steep sites. And machine harvest, generally speaking, doesn't necessarily mean a low quality wine, but does result in less labor costs. So perhaps cheaper grapes and perhaps a less expensive wine with machine harvest. So just finally, the aging regime of a winery may be to, for example, in Rioja, where they would legally have to age their wines for 2, 3, or 5 years in the bottles at the winery before being able to sell them. This would mean that a lot of inventory is tied up in the winery, and they would have to make up those, amortize those costs of of storing those wines to age them for that amount of time. So this is my diagram, my best approximation of what the price quality relationship might look like for wine. Along the left-hand column, you have quality attributes, higher quality going up. So poor, acceptable, good, very good, and outstanding are the terms taken directly from WSET. I've added great. So quality go higher on the vertical axis, and as you go from left to right along the horizontal axis, price goes up as well. So this slope, red line slope, is my best approximation of what the relationship might be. And so let's say for $10, less than that, generally it's a poor quality wine, but you can generally access roughly at the LCBO, we're talking about Ontario market prices with taxes and importation and everything. Generally $10 might get you an acceptable wine, 10 to 15. And the sweet spot I used to recommend to clients or to customers as a product consultant is $15 to $25. You'll get a good or possibly very good wine. It may be hand harvested. There may be some selection and removing of mog in these wineries at this price point, probably lower yields for this price point. And so good or very good, it'll be more complex, more expressive or concentrated, maybe a longer finish. And then the other sweet spot is $25 to $50, I would say. We're in this price range. The wine is going to be very good or great or outstanding, and low yields, minimal yields, hand harvested, hand sorted, maybe an oak program. And so the wines in this $25 to $50 sweet spot are going to be more concentrated, more expressive and complex, with a nice long, balanced, elegant finish. Great, so just a couple minutes left here on the Zoom before the kind folk kick us out. So in summary, for the money you're investing in your bottle of wine, how good is the wine? And can you say why it's good? And what we can say is that it has never been a better time to go out and purchase a bottle of wine. And once we're allowed to socialize with proximity, or even now via Zoom online, and other socializing online networks, it's never been a better time to get a bottle of wine and enjoy it, and enjoy each other's company, and enjoy the abundance we live in. So I'd like to say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to teach with